Hey guys, how are you doing? I trust this finds you well. Compliments of the new season. We are now in 2024. Can you believe it? Thanks be unto God, we made it into the new year. With all the challenges that we may have faced, here we are. Beginning of the new year, new beginnings, new visions, new goals for everybody, isn't it? And of course, this year is a year that will deliver elections and a possible new government in both South Africa and the US. Now, this is an interview, a reaction video on an interview that was done by Vivek Ramaswamy with NBC News. A fascinating interview. Vivek was firing in all cylinders, not pulling any punches. Let's dive in.
For the NBC News Des Moines Register interview series, Closing Arguments, Iowa.
Good to be here.
Welcome to the Des Moines Register newsroom.
It's good to be here.
So you completed yesterday what you're calling the double Grassley, the first time we've seen somebody complete the 99 county tour twice. But so far, if there's a groundswell of support for your campaign, it's yet to materialize in the polls. You said last week that you think you can win the Iowa caucuses. What are you seeing? What evidence on the ground do you see that the polls and the pundits are missing right now?
Just even take our biggest event last night. It was pretty representative of what we're seeing across the board. 90% of the people who came up afterwards, taking pictures, saying they support us, signing up as volunteers, are first-time caucus goers. So I think a lot of the polls are badly underestimating the level of support we have from college campuses, from libertarians, from conservatives and America First patriots, but who have not shown up at a traditional Republican caucus before. And so if those people come out, and I expect they will, they tell us they will, they're very actively engaged with our campaign, those numbers are growing by the week, I think we're going to be very successful at the Iowa caucus. I am highly confident we're going to shatter the expectations that have been set for us, and I do believe we have a shot at winning the Iowa caucus if many of those people do come out. And so I feel very good about where we sit, and we're excited for the path to the finish line.
Well, you've been setting a lot of those expectations for yourself, saying that you can beat Donald Trump, who right now is polling in the Des Moines Register NBC News Iowa poll at 51%. You're at 6%. What happens if you don't shock the world? Would you be willing to continue your campaign into New Hampshire?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. I'm going in this to the very end, and I'll tell you why. But if you look at a lot of that, even a lot of that polling, which I think is incomplete, some of those recent polls show I'm the runaway favorite for the second choice to Donald Trump, which suggests that people are actually weighing those options very carefully. There was a gentleman who came to one of our events in northeastern Iowa yesterday. He was wearing a Trump 2024 hat. He came to my event, and he asked a question. So I, lightly called out in a jovial fashion. I said, "I noticed the hat you're wearing." He says, "Yeah, I'm wearing the hat, but I'm supporting you. I think it needs to be somebody different. I'm convinced of that, but it's what this represents." And that actually spoke to me. It was interesting. And I just remember this because this was yesterday, but we see evidence of that across the board, of people who absolutely do say they support Donald Trump. In many sense, I support Donald Trump in his legacy as U.S. president. I respect what his contributions are to this country. But when making the choice of who's going to lead our America First movement to the next level, that's a separate choice. I do think we're in the middle of a kind of cold cultural war in this country between those of us who love the United States of America and a fringe minority who hates this country and what we stand for. And when it comes to selecting a commander-in-chief, a general, to lead us to victory in that war, I think I'm best positioned to do it with fresh legs as a leader who is not yet wounded in that war. And I do think a lot of people see that back in me as well, and will be making that choice accordingly on January 15th.
And to the point about the folks.
Now, that's rather quite interesting, what Vivek is saying there. I mean, as a South African, if I had lived in America, Vivek certainly has my vote with what I have seen up until now. Obviously, I'm a Trump fan, I like Donald Trump quite a lot. I think he did quite a great deal, not only for America, but for the world at the time he was the president. If you look at the capital markets all over the world, they were stable, there was visible progress. Oil was cheap, therefore petrol was cheap all over the world, food prices, and so on and so forth. So there's no doubt that most of us who understand what has happened in American politics from 2016 up until now, Donald Trump comes into these elections being a clear favorite. My only concern with Trump is the false indictments. And I'm saying they are false, but my concern is this. They are very divisive. Trump's attitude towards the Democrats towards Hillary Clinton, towards his nemesis, or rather his opponents as well, is very divisive. Now, that's the nature of politics. Make no mistake, I'm not downing Trump to uplift the Clintons or Biden. I think they are getting from Trump what they are deserving. But for me, the positive for Vivek, one is his age, two is what he has achieved in his personal life as an individual, three, also his academic qualifications, particularly that he also furthered and studied what called law. So he gives such versatility, he gives the voter such versatility to choose from, notwithstanding that the argument can be made that Trump is experienced in that he has done that, he has to finish what he has started. But what I'm trying to say is that the Republicans this time around, they seem to have options from which they can choose. If you ask me, and I had an opportunity to vote in America between Trump and Vivek, out of 10, I would say Vivek 10 and I would say Trump 9 as of now. More so that Trump did not show up in the debates. Now, I understand why he didn't show up, because everybody in those debates would obviously have something to take from Trump, and Trump had nothing to take from them in terms of reputation and so on and so forth. But I just love this young man. I love the fact that he thinks of his feet. He's very quick with his wit, and he's able to dismantle any, as a matter of fact, let me not put the cart before the horse. Let's hear him out in this interview, because this is a fascinating interview.
Are coming to your events. I think you've seen that there are those who are coming to your events who are having a hard time letting go of former President Trump. There was a woman who attended one of your events recently who actually stood up and asked you a question. She was speaking about former President Trump, and she asked you, she said, how do we not go caucus for him? How do we not vote for the guy that they're trying to tear apart? It feels wrong to abandon him. And I think we've all seen that sentiment across the Republican Party. Do you agree with your opponent, Ron DeSantis, who has also said that Trump's legal troubles have fundamentally changed the dynamics of this primary? Given that the troubles keep coming and they keep boosting him, do you agree with that?
I have a different view on this than Ron DeSantis. I think he's looking at it in the way that a traditional politician playing and gaming together how many delegates you collect would look at it. I'm looking at it through the lens of what's right for the country. And I think one difference, an area of difference where you see that is when they've eliminated Donald Trump from the ballots in places like Maine and potentially even in Colorado, I was the clearest and first and only one still to state that I would remove myself from those ballots. And I think that many people here appreciate that, but whether or not they appreciate it, that's the right thing to do, to say that if there's going to be election interference, not going through a legal process or otherwise, just one individual in a state like Maine deciding, waking up on a given day and saying that Donald Trump's going to be removed from the ballot, that's the wrong thing for our country. And so I stood up.
By the way, thumbs up for Vivek for doing that. That demonstrated tremendous integrity, that he's not just in this to win, but he's in this race, if anything, to leave a legacy of telling it like it is, truthfulness, integrity. For me, I took my head off when I heard it. I mean, barely a few hours, it was announced that Trump was being taken off the, what you call, the register for elections in a specific state. And Vivek says, well, if that is the case, I would take myself out as well. For me, that kind of send a chilling message to say this boy has tremendous integrity, that some people who are opposing Trump would obviously learn a lot. It's one thing to despise an individual. It's another to lie about their achievements. Trump has achieved significantly for America, such that if you compare his presidency to Joe Biden, there's no comparison. He has achieved so much, but for the unity of the country, I'm one of those people who would first agree that perhaps Vivek, now that Vivek is on the scene, he would be a good compromise for a Republican voter. Fortunately, I'm staying in South Africa, I do not necessarily have to discharge this responsibility, this dilemma. Okay, it will be left with Americans to discharge it. But either way, I would be happy if Trump or Vivek wins. To me, it makes absolutely no difference. Nevertheless, I'm simply saying, in my own assessment, if you asked me this question a year or so ago, I would have said Trump out of 10, 10 out of 10, and what to call anybody else will be sitting at 50%. And that is where, for me, Vivek started. It was 5 out of 10, and he went all the way to 10 out of 10 up until now, since he started opening up his mouth. But let's allow him to continue.
For that, just as I was the first and only person to clearly stand up against these politicized prosecutions against Donald Trump. I think it's very different than Ron DeSantis, who's been focused on collecting delegates.
Right, but all of that has helped him in this primary. His numbers have gone up every time these legal threats have come his way.
Look, I'm not a political analyst. I'm a candidate for U.S. president with a vision for this country.
But you see the same numbers we do.
Well, I'm in this. Dasha, here's my approach to running this race. I'm going to tell people who I am and what I stand for. Share my true convictions. Share it honestly without a filter. And my deal with the voters is you don't have to agree with 100% of what I say to support me. But what you know about me that's different than anybody else, I think in American politics today, certainly in this race, is I will tell you what I believe 100% of the time. And I think that that's a longer sales cycle, right? I think that Iowans, you know this well, wait until the end. They're very thoughtful about making their decisions. They're evaluating people almost as a job interview. And that's what this is. This is a job interview to be the next U.S. president. And I've not seen people anywhere in this country as thoughtful as Iowa about taking that process really seriously. So I think in the next 10 days is when a lot of those people will be making their final decisions. And my bet is they're going to reward the candidate who has been frank, who has been brutally direct with them through this process, not treating it as a political horse race analyst. The questions you're asking are fair questions I should ask to a candidate. I think most other candidates think about it this way. What's being reflected in the poll numbers? Is what I'm saying working or not? Adjusting accordingly. That's what traditional politicians do, not me. I would rather share my true convictions and lose this race than to win by playing that political snakes and ladders. So I'm just not doing that because I think it drains my inner core out of me if I were to be doing it. I prefer to bring, people use the word authenticity. What does it mean? Just tell people what you believe. Be unvarnished about it. Don't worry about what that's going to do to you in the polls or not. My whole bet in this campaign is that's actually going to be the most successful approach in the end. My bet is that's going to be the most successful approach here in Iowa at the very end of the process, which is what we're entering right now as well. But if I've told everybody in this state, and everybody in the state really knows who we are as a family and what we stand for, and then they decide...
Excuse the noise, guys. I'm recording this outside and during the day, unfortunately. So you'll excuse the noise. That is my neighbor's vehicle making that noise. Nevertheless, it should subside anytime it goes out. Let's hear Vivek out.
Go after somebody else or go for somebody else. I'm at peace with that. My bet is, though, they're actually going to reward that authenticity, especially because of the people we see on the ground. I think they have a sixth sense for a politician who's given them poll-tested slogans versus somebody who's telling them the truth. Not only do we do the full double Grassley, and we weren't even aiming to do that. It was a byproduct of a comprehensive strategy of doing, I think, more events than all of the other campaign candidates combined. We're going to be over 330 events, live events with Iowans across this state by the end of this process. That's not only more than the rest of the field combined. As far as I know, it might be the most ever that somebody has done. I think people here reward that. They understand the setting where even what they're seeing right now in this conversation will be cut. There will be TV screens in between them. There's 30-second ads that they're probably watching in between this and whatever the next program is. In a certain sense, that's fake. And I think many Iowans sense that. And so my hope is that they reward the candidate, not just that worked the hardest, and I certainly have, but the candidate who was, I think, the most unvarnished in sharing the things that other candidates probably know to be true but can't touch. Take the CO2 pipeline that's being built across half the state.
Well, and we do want to talk about that, but we have limited time.
But, you know, this boy is amazing. I mean, what he calls authenticity is really integrity, which is seldom found in politics. And I really hope, despite the media, because you can see how rude the interviewer is becoming, but despite the media's interjections and rhetoric, I hope the voters on the ground can literally see what Vivek is, and honor him for that, particularly in choosing who the Republican leader is going to be with all the challenges that Trump is faced with. It's not good for any candidate and for any country to have a scenario that has been built in the last, from 2016. Now, I'm not saying 2016 was bad, what to call for America as such, because America and the world got an independent businessman president who ran a government business-like, which was good for the respective currencies of the respective countries in which we live. However, all I'm simply pointing is that his rhetoric, leave his policies now, his rhetoric was not good, and the voter, the men on the street, they also focus on those things. Sadly, whether that's the right approach or not, for me, that is immaterial. We're also talking about integrity. Vivek is a family man. There are no known scandals around Vivek's life. He's a married man. He has a son with his wife. It is not known. In fact, if there were any such scandals, by now the media would have already picked up on them. So for me, this is probably the cleanest candidate for a Republican that you are going to have. But and I hope that he will be honored for that by those who are supposed to cast the vote.
So I just want to get to a few other topics. In a lot of ways, you have been unvarnished about some of these hot topics in the news right now. You have said that you would pardon former President Trump. It would be a day one pardon. Why do you think that's the best decision for the country?
I think it's the best decision for this country for two reasons. One is those prosecutions are themselves politicized and using unprecedented legal theories that obviously would never have been levied unless there was a political motivation at issue, which is to eliminate Donald Trump from contention. I also think it's the right thing to do to unite this country and move our country forward. I do believe I am the single best equipped candidate to lead this country forward, unite the country, not through some fake national unity of compromising on principles and having a split the baby difference on some policies. No, that's not how I'm going to unite the country. I think the way I'll unite this country is by standing for the shared ideals that actually unite all of us as Americans, that set this country into motion in 1776. And one of those is one standard of the rule of law, and another is that we the people select who leads this country, not unelected bureaucrats. And I will stand for that principle.
So to follow...
Wow. This boy is remarkable. You see how he takes that question, which was really, remember they have Vivek in the studio and not Trump. And yet they keep on asking him questions about Trump instead of questions about his policies. But did you see how he took that question, answered it adequately without going around it, and then immediately brought his policy in as to how he's going to run and unite the country? For me, this is one of the most exciting candidates to watch and to listen to.
Well, that logic there, would you then potentially ask Republicans to stand down on investigations of President Biden in the spirit of not putting the country through more turmoil?
If they were using unprecedented legal theories to investigate and torture the law to do that, then I would say, then I wouldn't want that in some other fringe personal charge. That's not what's happening now, though, with respect to specifically what's going on in Ukraine. The very country that paid a $5 million alleged bribe to Hunter Biden, this is relevant to the actual policies of the country right now, when that very president is sending $200 billion of our taxpayer money to that same country. If this is affecting our foreign policy, and I'm unsparing with Republicans or Democrats alike, you think about the likes of Nikki Haley and a lot of the foreign dealings and a lot of the military contracting work. If that's actually affecting the policies that affect everyday Americans and the lives of our sons and daughters, that absolutely is an important area for investigation.
What about Hunter Biden, who's not a...
Amazing. You know, these individuals masquerade as journalists, but all they are political activists. This lady is a political activist. Listen to the type of questions that are being asked. And every time the question is answered, there is an interjection. Okay, either it's an issue of time, I don't have adequate time, or let's move on to the next question. This is not how you do journalism. When you ask a question, you allow the person whom you are interviewing to adequately respond to your question. And then from there, if you have a follow-up, you follow up. If you have to move on to the next question, that is fine. But you can't, whilst the person is in the middle of answering your question, and then you interject, but what about this? Because the question was about the Republicans stopping, would you, if you were a president, stop the Republicans from investigating President Biden? I do not understand why that question arises in the first place, save, and that is what makes me to say she's a political player. I do not understand how can such a question arise, considering all the evidence that is at our disposal right now about how Hunter Biden was involved with Burisma, and how that he was involved with Ukraine, and how that even Biden himself bragged publicly about how he got a prosecutor to be dismissed, having promised not to transfer $1 billion to the Ukraine government at the particular moment was he was still a deputy president. So for me, he self-snitched on himself. Notwithstanding the self-snitching, there's also quite a lot of evidence that the Republican Congress has been pulling out right now as we speak. So I'm not quite sure why then would she not rather, as a media person, allow the investigation process to unfold to its logical conclusion, rather than trying to persuade a future possible state president to say, would you do this? And thereby, if you're observing the line of questioning, she's trying to get the Republicans to wage war against one another, right? So if Vivek, for example, were to come out and say that, that would be obviously a stance against a legitimate party position right now of investigating the corrupt Biden family, which is something to me that should have been done a long time before, and which would have preserved Trump in the office as a president in the first place, if there hasn't been lies by the media around about the Hunter Biden laptop, and the FBI, the 50 or 51 FBI agents, senior agents who came out publicly lying about that, and the Russia collusion nonsense, and so on and so forth. So all of these are media narratives which are seeking to do one thing and one thing only, to frustrate the cause of Donald Trump and that of the Republicans, to influence the elections of the US of A, to go towards a particular direction, which thing they did successively, or rather successfully, that's a correct word, successfully in 2020. Let's proceed.
Impacting policy. Would you pardon Hunter Biden?
So on this Ukraine charges, I think we need to go all the way to the very bottom of it. I do think it's impacting policy, Dasha.
But Hunter Biden, the gun charges, the other charges that aren't impacting policy, would you pardon?
The ones that I'm laser focused on, and I absolutely would not pardon for, because I think we need to get to the bottom of it if he is convicted, is if that $5 million bribe was indeed paid to him for reasons to influence U.S. policy, and then watching it successfully influence U.S. policy. If that's proven in a court of law, I would not pardon Hunter Biden.
But the charges right now are focused on the gun charges.
Well, where I think they need to be focused is on the essence.
But right now, on the gun charges, would you consider pardoning?
I think a lot of that is a deflection, Dasha. I think it's a deflection by the Democrats. I think that they're bringing a thin, flimsy charge on an unrelated matter to deflect the plot away from where the investigation needs to be focused. And so on my watch and at my encouragement, and I've been very clear about this, we need to be crystal clear about whether the Biden family, and I think I have the same concern if it's a Republican in the same shoes, sells off our foreign policy to make their family wealthy. That's wrong no matter who does it, Republican or Democrat. I'm even-handed about that. But I do think that we need to apply one standard of the rule of law. That's not inventing a novel legal theory. That's basics of bribery and affecting our foreign policy. That would be wrong, and if that's proven in a court of law, I would not pardon Hunter Biden for it.
I want to ask you.
And that would be treason. So why would you pardon a treasonous character? It's treason to do what Hunter Biden and his father have actually done. So if they are found guilty in a court of law, there's no precedent that should pardon that. Nevertheless, I'm pretty sure Joe Biden will pardon his son before he gets off the office. Otherwise, what we call in South Africa the pesal dance. All hell will break loose if Joe Biden doesn't pardon Hunter. That is where the truth will be naked in the public domain. All the things that Hunter did for his father will suddenly be in the public domain if he feels that he's being neglected and left by himself at the back there without any help from his father.
About Donald Trump. You said recently at a campaign stop that the left won't let Donald Trump get anywhere near the White House. What did you mean by that?
I don't know, if I say the left or I said that broadly the system. This was what I believe I've been saying. Because I don't think this is a left versus right issue necessarily, or Republican versus Democrat issue. I think a lot of the establishment pervades even the Republican Party as well. So I don't view this through partisan terms, but I believe the system is making crystal clear by the day that they will not let this man, by hell or high water, get anywhere near the White House again. And I believe they're making it increasingly clear they will stop at nothing to stop him from getting close to the White House. I believe it's a bit of a trap they've laid for many of the Republican Party members who believe that they're voting for Donald Trump in the expectation he's going to be the president. I think there's something else altogether going on here where they want to narrow this down to be a two-horse race between Donald Trump and somebody else. I have my views on who that is. And to be able to prop up that other chosen puppet by eliminating Donald Trump from contention. You don't have to stretch the imagination to see first the protests, then the civil suits, then the state-level prosecution, then the federal prosecutions, and then now, even without prosecution, the multiple efforts across this country to keep him off the ballot. And that's just in 2023. As we enter 2024, I predict that's just going to be the tip of the iceberg. This is a system, an establishment that has an anaphylactic response to this man. And so I respect his contributions to this country. I think a lot of our base, myself included, loves the man because he got this fight started. But I think now it's our job to finish it. And I think I'm the person in this race who can take our America First agenda to the next level. Do it by bringing in young people and others into our movement that haven't been part of the Republican Party or even the America First movement. That's my job, to take what Donald Trump started, but to take this to the next level. Go far further on many policies than he did, but also unite this country in the process. And yes, to do it as a candidate who has not yet been wounded in the war they've waged on him.
So are you
I think it's wrong, but that's what I believe.
So are you running expecting?
So basically, what Vivek is saying, without saying it, they've done everything humanly possible to remove Trump from these elections. The next logical step is exactly what Tucker Carlson said publicly, that they are going to kill the man. Now some people would say, wow, how can you say that? But look at all the signs, the dog whistling. Look at all their endeavors that are failing. And every time they take a step, Trump shoots up in the polls. What do you remember? These people are on a number of different medications, okay? Including crazy pills, right? These people's hatred for Donald Trump is palpable, okay? It's very, very important. And the fact, they can't stand the fact that there is absolutely nothing they can do to diminish the man. On the other side, I think that Trump has done quite a lot. This is now my view. Trump has done quite a lot for America. It is high time for him. Now, I know this is way beyond Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is an individual who went publicly and said, when he was asked about whether he has ever asked for forgiveness from God, and he said that he has nothing to ask God for forgiveness for. For me, that is a spirit that is pushing Donald Trump to insist on becoming a president, when he can see that all the chips, the entire system is against him. Even if it means he loses his life, he is willing to go on and be a martyr for this cause. The question is this a justifiable cause for anybody to lose their life? My immediate answer is no. Why? Because Donald Trump is not pushing the Lordship of Jesus Christ. He's at some point in time, that is why I said I'll put Vivek 10 and Trump 9. Why? At some point in time, he has to understand that this is bigger than him. Okay, and the only person who really can win the battle for the Republicans, or not Republicans, for Americans, because Democrats are also affected by the high prices. They are also affected by the dictatorship of Joe Biden, of trying to force people to be vaccinated, and all the ill policies that have skyrocketed the prices of food, meat, fuel, and so on and so forth, including houses, that many people right now are being kicked out of their houses. Sadly, this is not only happening in America, it's happening all over the world. So this has a ripple effect across the world, because as the saying goes, when America sneezes, the whole world catches the flu. So this is much bigger than Donald Trump. He may have started it, as Vivek says, but now he should leave it to the youngsters who have the stamina, who have the lingo to unite the country, who are not as toxic as perceived by the media as Donald Trump is. But his pride won't allow him to quit what is ahead, because this is the most appropriate time for him to quit. You know what the scripture says in the book of Proverbs? It says, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before the fall. It is very important for Trump, because Trump can be his own worst enemy. He did a great job for which we are all grateful for, because we were beneficiaries. If you stay in any Western democracy, as I do in South Africa, we are grateful for what Trump has achieved. But with a Vivek Ramaswamy on the scene, even Trump shout Vivek's what to call praises from time to time. Isn't then perhaps time for him to simply endorse Vivek and step down? That would be a powerful statement that would propel Vivek to be the next, firstly, to be the candidate for the Republican, and it will completely dismantle the narrative of both the media and the Democrats, and it will create an outright majority winner of the upcoming elections, because I've had a lot of Democrats in the media, on social media, they saying they would vote for Vivek. So Vivek is the real uniting individual here, and not Donald Trump. Of course, you're going to give me what you think down below, but I'm simply saying, if we want a unifier, a unifying candidate who's quite competent, who is going to be pushing the mega concept of America first, right? It's important that when people are looking at the issue of America first, make America great again, they do not idolize Donald Trump, because America was founded on godly principles, on the Judean Christian religion. People must never forget that it is those principles to which Trump is supposed to be pursuing. Okay? It is those principles that is supposed to be pursuing. People are not supposed to idolize an individual, because that is obviously an affront to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, let's hear what this lady has to say to Vivek.
That he won't be in the race in November?
I have deep concerns as an American that this system is going to take him out of contention.
I want to rewind that so that we can hear the question properly.
In the war they've waged on him.
So are you
I think it's wrong, but that's what I believe.
So are you running expecting that he won't be in the race in November?
I have deep concerns as an American that this system is going to take him out of contention. I've done everything in my power to limit the likelihood of that happening. I called on every other Republican to join me in saying, when they removed him from the ballot in Maine and Colorado, I voluntarily said I would remove myself too. And I asked Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Chris Christie, I demanded that they do the same thing, because that's how you nullify the impact of that election interference, to say if they're going to behave this way in Maine, then Maine won't count in our GOP primary. I've tried my best and gone to the fullest extent I can. But if we open our eyes to a reality, I think that there is a unstoppable force attempting to move what they view as an unmovable object. But eventually, I'm worried that that unstoppable force of the system is going to result in something that isn't good for the country. But I refuse to be then a passive bystander watching them prop up who their chosen puppet is. I believe that it's my responsibility to take our America First movement to the next level. That's not how I want this to play out, but I'm worried that's the direction things are going.
If you believe the system is rigged...
You know, this is quite amazing. This is quite amazing, because as a believer, as a Christian, Vivek is touching, is touching on some fundamental issues here that many Democrats and the Republicans, first and foremost, when Vivek started talking about this aspect of the system is doing everything against Trump. He literally said, I don't believe it's the Democrats, it's the system. And the system is stronger than Democrats, meaning it's both Republicans, establishment, as well as Democrats. But guess what? Those individuals serve a particular individual whom they trembled before. And this becomes spiritual when you think about it. Because in order to control the world, you have to control America. America is a superpower. I may not expound on what I'm saying right now, but those who have got spiritual eyes to see will know what I'm talking about. Of course, I don't mind answering that, but if you don't pick, if your spiritual antenna is not there, that's fine. But if it is there, you will appreciate what I'm saying here, because it seems to me Vivek can see that as well. And that's amazing considering that he is a Hindu, right? Nevertheless, there is a hegemony to destroy what we call any candidate that's going to push the America first. Why? Because it will be a hindrance towards the establishment of the New World Order that George W. Bush Sr. spoke about in 1991, that his son spoke about when he came, that Clinton spoke about when he came, that Obama spoke about when he came, that presidents all over the world, including South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa speaks about. So there is a spirit that is at work here that has influenced all these presidents to push for an agenda of a new world order. And that's what Vivek literally is saying. He may not have said it in as many words, but that's what he's seeing. And this spirit is influencing both Democrats and the so-called rhinos in the Republican Party. Okay, let's continue then and hear the latest question.
Against former President Trump, and you're willing to go so far as to pull out of Colorado and Maine because they won't put him on the ballot. Why not then go further and make the ultimate statement and pull out of the race if you think that it's rigged?
Oh, it's obviously what they're planning to do. They want this to be a two-horse race, and they want their chosen puppet to win the race by eliminating Donald Trump. I'm not going to let him get away with that plan. To the contrary, I worry that our Republican base and many Trump supporters are falling for that.
Guys, Vivek is a lawyer by training, amongst other things, right? Did you hear what he just said now? He is a lawyer by training, so he deliberately uses certain words. He said, I'm not going to allow them because they want to raise a puppet to compete with Donald Trump and be getting their puppet to win by eliminating Donald Trump. Now, the word eliminate obviously carries a plethora of meanings. You get the point? So he is literally communicating what Taka said without necessarily saying it in plain and simple language, so that he doesn't get foul or rather prey to the media coming up with a narrative that Vivek is pushing an agenda of Donald Trump being shot at. But that's basically what he's saying if you are paying attention to the underlying meaning of what he's communicating. He can say this because he's quite good, as I've said. His diction is quite good at it. He's got a vast vocabulary, and he is able to communicate something and be deliberately something that if you try to interpret it, he can say, but eliminate can simply means to remove. It does not necessarily mean to kill. Can you see that? This is amazing, but I think he's got it.
But pulling out of Maine and Colorado, you're losing delegates anyway.
Well,
so why not pull out altogether and say, I'm not playing this game? You refuse to play a lot of games. Why not?
The whole point is I'm in this for the country. Okay, so I'm going to do the right thing and stand on principle. I still hold out hope. I'm going to continue to call out Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Chris Christie. I think that they will be exposed as being, culpable, indirectly culpable for facilitating this election interference. And so I expect and continue to demand that they pull out of any ballot in which Donald Trump's illegally removed from that ballot, Maine and Colorado included. That's how we nullify that impact. So everything I'm doing is how am I having a maximum positive impact on our country? But I think that I will refuse to be a bystander watching this to be narrowed down to a two-horse race where I believe they have a clear plan and intention of removing Donald Trump, eliminating him from competition by whatever means necessary. And I think it is my responsibility to our America First movement. I think it's my responsibility to our country to make sure that we don't have a mega donor class establishment.
Wow, there he said it, by whatever means necessary. And by the way, he's right when he's saying the Nikki Haley's, the what to call Chris Christie and DeSantis are quite culpable in terms of what is happening, because they themselves are deep state operatives. Okay, they are establishment politicians, so they are part of this because they get to be told by their donors what to do and what is it that they desire to do. And these donors are the multi-billionaires that sponsors a particular agenda and a particular strategy or vision of where America should go. And right now, they have drank the Kool-Aid of the New World Order. And they know that Trump will obviously, as he has interrupted that from 2016 to 2020, Trump will obviously further interrupt that if he comes to power. And right now, it seems as though they cannot stand for the interruption of their plan. Any further interruption, it seems, will result in Trump's being removed by whatever means necessary. Please pay attention to what Vivek is saying here, because he's also unloading a lot of truths, right? I said when I began, he is firing in all cylinders. And that is so hitherto if you're paying attention to his words. Meaning Vivek is not blind. He can see what their plan is. The plan is right in front of everybody. It's in plain sight. It's not like these guys are hiding what they are intending to do with Donald Trump.
Favorite puppet waltzing into the White House, and instead a patriot who actually cares about this country, who is capable of taking that America First agenda to the next level. And in many cases, I think I am going further than Donald Trump. I've been crystal clear that I would shut down the FBI, not implement incremental reform. I've offered a comprehensive plan to do it. I've said that I would use our own military, not just building a southern border wall, but use our own military to secure our own borders in this country. End birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals. The 14th Amendment, I believe, is crystal clear on the fact that it does not apply to those kids of illegals. So both on policy and my ability to execute, my ability to bring younger people into this movement, but also perhaps most relevant this year, my ability to get to the finish line, it's my obligation to make sure we stay in this race through the end. And I expect that I will be the next president of the United States. I don't expect that the task of uniting and leading this country is going to be an easy one. I think it's going to take a leader with a lot of attributes, but that's why I'm in this.
But why wouldn't that same rigged system, if you're going...
This boy is amazing. Vivek is, I won't tell you how many years younger than myself, but the boy is amazing. As I said, he's witty, he thinks of his feet. And you can tell he doesn't open up his mouth without thinking. This is a skill that many people who have never debated, they lack, right? It's clear that Vivek debated when he was growing up, whether at high school or at varsity, he was in a debating society. He thinks before he opens up his mouth. And he's not just eloquent in speech and spewing nonsense with his mouth. He's not suffering from verbal diarrhea. No, he makes a lot of sense. Very logical. He uses the principles of logic when he speaks. Undoubtedly. I just want to rewind it so that we can get this interrupter or this political masquerade as a journalist question from the beginning.
Be the next president of the United States. I don't expect that the task of uniting and leading this country is going to be an easy one. I think it's going to take a leader with a lot of attributes, but that's why I'm in this.
But why wouldn't that same rigged system, if you're going even further than Donald Trump, why wouldn't it work against you too?
Well, look, they don't have on me what they have on him. You can just look right now. They've got 4 different wars they've waged on this man. At the end of the day, if we need a commander-in-chief who's going to lead us to victory, I think that our base needs to choose the general who is not yet wounded in that war.
Right,
That's
and you've said
and
this.
I'm going to say one more thing, Dash, about this. This is important. I think it takes 2 things to actually get this right. One is an outsider who can break the system when necessary. I bring that. Trump brings that too. But it also takes an outsider who knows and deeply understands the law and the Constitution of this country. I think in many ways, this managerial class in the swamp, they duped Donald Trump. They told him you couldn't fire 75% of those federal bureaucrats because of civil service protections. That's not true. You absolutely can in the context of a mass firing. Same thing from ending birthright citizenship to using our military to actually use even local law enforcement for mass deportations out of this country. They duped Trump in a way that they won't be duping me. And those two things don't usually go together, the academic law type and the business guy who can break things. The fact that those two things don't usually go together, well, that's what pulls me into this race and gives me a duty to lead this country as I expect it will.
Let me ask you.
And that's why, as a South African, that's the only thing that I regret, that I cannot participate in these elections and put my ex next to Vivek Ramaswamy. Because he just said it right there. For me, his CV is impeccable. As though that was not adequate, he went and did an LLB. Now, this gave him an inside lane into understanding not only politics, but how the law affects those politics and how administrative decisions can be made whilst they are made within the law, meaning you talk about administration justice, meaning admin decisions that are just and lawful. This is an area that Trump would have fallen prey in for a number of reasons. Trump has had a lot of success in his life in the media space in which he operated for so many years and the construction space in which he operated for so many years. And 9 out of 10, he doesn't have in fact, 10 out of 10, he doesn't have the legal mind that Vivek has by reason of having obtained such a degree. And for me, this is one of the weaknesses that he demonstrated. For crying out loud, Trump said in a debate, when Hillary said, we can't have Trump as a president, and Trump responded, he said, because you'll go in jail, you'll go to jail. Hillary never went to jail. Did Hillary commit an offense that really deserved to go to jail? Yeah, she did. Remember the emails? It was discovered that Comey spied on Trump, and Trump fired Comey. But what did Trump do with the president that spied on him, that is Obama? He did nothing about that. So even the issues of Biden, there's a lot of meat and substance in the Biden crime family. Trump did not send those people to jail. When you look at the Black Lives Matter movement and the Antifa that banned buildings and everything that's bannable in the cities in 2020, he was a sitting president. Why was he content to just speak about that and rather than acting on it? How did America become such a lawless country to an extent that a billion US dollar property was destroyed? And he also is the president that closed the economy. Remember that. He did very well for the economy, but the closure was suspending the Constitution of America and becoming a dictator. Am I saying Trump is not a dictator? Well, he didn't manifest it in his first term, except for this time when he closed the economy. That for me sent a very strong sour taste in my mouth, particularly that so many countries all over the world followed suit. Yes, he did reopen the economy. Yes, he did turn the economy back. But why did he close it in the first place when, remember, he kept on saying this is a China's virus. So he kept on telling the truth with his speech, but it's like you speak right and you walk left. And for me, and I've heard Candace Owens in one program also touching on this, to say my only issue with Trump, and I did a video that is on this very channel, where I said that our president in South Africa followed that crazy policy of closing the country and copying it from Trump. That, for me, I vehemently disagreed with. Why? Because of how much rights it took away from a constitutional democracy. In the case of America, a constitutional republic. You get the point? So these are issues that are quite important, that even when it came to the so-called draining the swamp, did he drain the swamp? You get the point? How many people, how much of the swamp still remains simply because he didn't understand which law to use to discharge which responsibility? I think that Trump did an excellent job as far as he could. it's time now to allow young, enthusiastic, dynamic thinkers who think of their feet to take over the office. And who better than Vivek Ramaswamy? If Trump were to come out publicly and simply endorse the young man, I think he would win the elections. He will run away with it, because the Democrats, even if they put what is this idiot from New York now? Even if they put, they wouldn't put him because they still have to focus on the deputy president, right? There's even rumors that Michelle Obama may be running for president. We saw that she released, there was a journalist that, a Republican journalist rather, or a political analyst rather than a journalist, who was analyzing this on Fox News sometime when Tucker Carlson was still at Fox, saying that if you look at the modus operandi, how Obama became a president, he released X number of books and he attended X number of charity organization and donations. Michelle Obama has been following the same, reading from the same hymn sheet. And he suspects strongly that Michelle would be the 2024 candidate for the Democrats, but it will be announced as close to the elections as possible, so as not to create a space for Trump to malign her image. But obviously, if that is the case, 9 out of 10, the Democrats would be able to pull the strings for the elections to favor them, particularly if you consider how Trump is regarded even by some Republicans. I'm not talking about rhinos now, by some Republicans who think that Trump is toxic. Okay, I'm certainly not a Democrat, even in my own country. So if you look at the politics of the Democrats, which, well, you know, I don't have to explain what Democrats believe. So I'm certainly not a Democrat, but even I believe that there is a certain level of toxicity that President Trump has. As good as he was, we must admit that that's the only step towards rehabilitation, accepting where we were not wrong in believing in President Trump. Even now, people are not wrong in believing in President Trump because he was cheated. Obviously, he was cheated. The elections were stolen, as we all know, contrary to the media narrative. 2,000 mules proves that beyond reasonable doubt. And some further evidence is coming out up until now that indeed the 2020 elections were stolen. But let's continue with the interview.
In recent weeks, you've put a lot of ideas out there. You've suggested on the campaign trail that January 6th was an inside job, that the plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer was a job of inside entrapment, that the House Republicans, let me finish, that the House Republicans impeachment inquiry is part of a Democratic plot to sideline Biden, that there is a devious Democratic scheme to actually nominate Nikki Haley. The reality is none of these are top issues for Iowa voters. So why are you focused on these conspiracy theories?
Well, focused is a heavy-handed word, Dasha. If you take 80% of what I said, I'm talking about policy and future direction of the country, talking about how we'll increase the supply of energy to bring down the cost for everyday Americans. And so that's 80% of what I'm talking about. But I'm not going to hide from what I do believe are realities hiding in plain sight that people deserve to know about, which the last item that you described. It's not a secret that Larry Fink is going to fundraisers of Nikki Haley, propping her up. That actually one of the biggest funders of the lawsuits against Trump, including efforts to keep him off the ballot, is Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. That's a $250,000 donor to super PAC supporting Nikki Haley. And so I reject this mainstream media general narrative of dismissing something as a conspiracy theory, when in fact I'm a big fan of going after facts hiding in plain sight.
But you know that when you say these things, you know when you bring up the Gretchen Whitmer thing.
This is rather interesting because now the journalist, you'll pardon me, I forgot her name, but nevertheless, she's a political masquerade. She's a political activist masquerading as a journalist. Observe how she's interjecting, not allowing Vivek to finish his sentences. That's not journalism. That is activism. It's like you're talking about judges in the bench. Judges are not supposed to be activists. They are supposed to follow the law. Journalists are supposed to ask well-thought questions And if those questions are answered, then they suppose, and they still maybe you have a proclivity to follow up. But now she's literally trying to come up with theories that what Vivek is talking about in the main is conspiracy theories. But Vivek is not a conspiracy theorist. What they call conspiracy theory as a media is something that you, as an American, or for that matter, as a South African, when the mainstream media says something is conspiracy theory, you need to pay attention to that, because that thing is going to happen very soon. And the same media is going to be pushing that very narrative. Okay? When they are not ready for a certain reality, they call it a conspiracy theory. Okay? That's what they do. Look at how they treated the issue of the vaccine during COVID times. And none of them are talking about it today in the mainstream media, despite the fact that there's myocarditis, there's pericarditis, 35-year-olds are dying of heart conditions all over America, all over the world. None of them are talking about that and what their role was in pushing these untested poisons in people's bloods, okay? And how that they supported mandates by the Democrats, or let me rather say by the Biden family, President Biden. So it's very, very important for people to always be alive to the propaganda of the media machinery. This is nothing what this girl is pushing here but propaganda. But let's hear it out.
When you bring up January 6th being an inside job, yes, 80% of what you talk about might be policy, but when you hit those issues, that's going to take over the news cycle. You know how it works.
I don't think it should. I'm speaking the truth as it is.
How does she know what she's saying right now? Observe that she's speaking on behalf of Iwans. Where did she do a survey to find out what Iwans think about these issues that Vivek is raising? Because when you listen to the town halls, Vivek is getting standing ovations. Okay? When you listen to the people, when they're asking Vivek questions, you can see how satisfied they are by his responses. So where does she get it from that what Vivek is putting on the table is not really what Iwans wants to talk about? Where does she get that from? That right there should tell you that she is a political activist masquerading as a journalist. And these people give journalism a bad name. That is why President Donald J. Trump called them what? Fake news. Okay, let's proceed. I'm just going to rewind it a little bit so that you can get the context of this part of the debate.
January
6th
being an inside job. Yes, 80% of what you talk about might be policy, but when you hit those issues, that's going to take over the news cycle. You know how it works.
I don't think it should. I'm speaking the truth
but
as it is.
You're a smart guy. You know how it works. Are you using that to get attention as you've been slumping in the polls?
To the contrary, I'm actually speaking. You have a lot of political analysts that look at this and say exactly what you're saying. Why aren't you just saying what causes you to poll better? It's what every other political candidate's doing. They're taking what their consultants serve them up. Here's what the voters say are the top issues. Spout back to them what the voters want to hear.
So why?
I'm sharing my true convictions. And I think if we want to revive our constitutional republic, we deserve a government that tells the people the truth again. Not just when it's easy, but when it is hard. Our government has systematically lied to us on things that really matter. Of the origin of COVID-19, we were told for years that it didn't come from a lab in China, when it absolutely did. In fact, you were suppressed on social media for saying it. The eve of the last election, I think it's shameful that the Hunter Biden laptop story was systematically suppressed, so voters didn't have that information.
But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about Gretchen Whitmer being an inside job of entrapment.
I'm talking about a government that has lied.
Do you hear that? Now, as a person who's listened to almost every Vivek Ramaswamy's interview, I can tell you Vivek talks about all of these issues, including the ones this lady is raising. But she wants to create a narrative that, no, that's not what you are talking about. Meaning right now, she's lying through her teeth. This is a problem with mainstream media. It doesn't take much research to identify what Vivek talks about, because it's out in the public domain. You can go to the different, including previous NBC interviews. You see that Vivek touches on all of these things. You can go to his CNN interviews, Fox interviews, and you can go to the different town halls. He talks about all of these things. Even in the debates, he touches on all of those things. He's the only candidate that is so broad and versatile and touching on the issues that affect people and also alerting people about what is hiding in plain sight that Americans may not be privy to because their mainstream media is not talking about it. Can you see that? So she's doing the best that she can here to discredit the only candidate on the candidates that are available, of course, apart from Trump, because Trump touches on these issues himself if you listen to him in his rallies. And that is why Americans love Trump. Okay, let's proceed.
To its people, the same FBI that's investigating conservatives, the same FBI and the same law enforcement apparatus, Jack Smith, that has subpoenaed millions of Americans for anybody who liked or retweeted a Donald Trump post in 2020. That's Orwellian, but that's the same federal law enforcement apparatus that put people up to an alleged kidnapping plot that they otherwise wouldn't have been put up to. Multiple defendants acquitted on grounds of entrapment. And so is this a top issue that voters bring up on the mind of voters? Absolutely it's not. But the mainstream media is pushing, and the establishment in both parties is pushing one established narrative.
So if it's not a priority for voters, why are you so focused on it?
Because truth is a priority for me.
There you go. There you go. Truth is a priority for me. This is why I like this boy. Okay? This is why I like this guy. I shouldn't call him a boy. He's much younger than myself, but I shouldn't call him a boy. It's disrespectful to call a father who's a husband a boy. I like this guy. I like this gentleman. This is why I like Vivek, because Vivek is telling it like it is. And why are you pushing it if it is not the main thing for the voters? Well, it ought to be the main thing, not for the voters, but for the mainstream media to set things straight. But they are hiding it, and now they are offended that there's somebody in the public domain like Vivek who's talking about it. That's the real issue here. That's the real contention. Why are you talking about the things that we as the media have decided that the public should not know about? That's the issue here. It's terrible, but it's happening all over the world. That's why sometimes I make a lot of videos about South Africa. My channel is called USA News. Sorry, South Africa, Mzansi and USA News. Mzansi being South Africa. So from time to time I have to drop an American video. But the reality is, I know more about American politics than most American citizens who are going to vote in these elections. All right? That's a reality. And when you talk about narratives, there's a lot of narratives that you find on Fox News that are false. There's a lot of narratives that you find on CNN that are false. There's a lot of narratives that you find on NBC, on ABC that are patently false. 60 minutes, patently false. And I knew all of this before. I knew that the Hunter Biden laptop was not a Russian, a hoax at all. And I was very upset when the 51 different CIA agents came out saying that it was. I knew a lot about Joe Biden, comparatively speaking to Americans. Hence, I was very shocked to learn that Joe Biden somehow won the elections. Yes, Joe Biden, according to the official results, they claim that he won the elections. But according to 2000 News, he lost the elections. I, for a very good period of time, believe that he lost the elections. But the fact that there are Americans who proudly come publicly and claim, who work for the media houses, that Joe Biden won the elections is a reflection of the citizenry. Make no mistake about it. I'm also fully aware of that. How are these people getting away with these narratives sitting in your media houses? How? There are so many things that can be done to remove them by civil society. Why are Americans not united to remove these liars and imposters who are seeking to control your narrative? Nevertheless, let's proceed.
The answer. Truth is the priority for this campaign. And I don't need to be speaking to what every other professional politician is spouting off. We need to speak the hard truths that other candidates are unwilling to touch. And even though that doesn't poll necessarily on what NBC or the Des Moines Register or another media outlet is going to ask voters what are the top issues on their mind, it's important. What really is important to many voters, I believe, is a government that trusts them with the hard truth again. That hasn't happened for a very long time. And so my view is, if that's what the voters want, that's what they're going to get from me. If they want somebody who's going to incrementally reform things, change tax rates by 1% one direction or another, and call that a legislative accomplishment, go with somebody else. That's not me. But if you want a candidate who is actually going to revive the ideals of 1776, who is going to trust the people transparently with what the government knows to be true, if you want a government that actually is of and for and by the people again, I think I'm the sole candidate in this race who can deliver that. And that choice is up to the voters, but I believe that's what the voters will want. If not, I won't be the president.
Mr. Ramaswamy.
But if it is,
So basically, Vivek is saying he's going to give you guys a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And that's true democracy, by the way, as defined. Wow. The gentleman is remarkable. Really. Hitherto, in this interview, I can't fault him in his answers. He's been at top of his game. These political agents masquerading as journalists have hitherto not been able to confound him with anything. Now, I'm enjoying this. It has gone over 1 hour. I'll see how far it goes. I may not go all the way because I'm quite concerned. I know people of today, the youth of today, people who are at Vivek's age group, they don't like, their span of attention is very short. They don't like watching longer documentaries or movies or analysis. Of course, that's not applicable to Vivek. He would not have gone as far as he did with his education if that was the case.
I will.
I want to move us along a little bit. Iowa's former U.S. Representative Steve King endorsed your campaign last night. Steve King was voted out of office by Iowa Republicans in the state's most conservative district. Do you think it helps your campaign to align yourself with him?
I think it helps to have his endorsement in the sense that it helps.
Did you guys hear the question? Do you think it helps your campaign to align yourself with him? That question is completely an entrapment itself, because Vivek did not align himself to the individual. It's the individual that aligned himself to Vivek. Those are two different things. When someone endorses you, you have absolutely nothing to say about their endorsement. You can reject their endorsement if you want to, particularly, for example, if a person is a Ku Klux Klan, right? You can outright reject their endorsement, but you have no power or say as to who endorses you. That's the point. But nevertheless, let's hear what Vivek has to say.
To have anybody who's aligned with your own views and vision to say publicly that they support you, I'm proud to have his endorsement. I also think a lot of the media's narrative, I've gotten to know him. I didn't know him before this race. I've only gotten to know him in the last couple of months. But I will tell you, he has earned my trust for me to be able to say when he tells me what the New York Times and others reported about him was downright false, I believe him sooner than I believe the New York Times, because I've had my experiences with both. I think he's an honest, direct, plain-spoken, and good-hearted patriot for this country. I'm proud to have his endorsement. And I think we've found common cause on a lot of other issues that other Republican candidates have been unwilling to touch, from the CO2 pipelines, illegal use of eminent domain to seize farmland from innocent farmers in this state, to, yes, my view that we do need border security. He was called racist in part for calling for building the wall before that was popular. Well, now that's actually mainstream thinking in both major political parties. And so in some ways, I think he was ahead of his time. He's not only, I think, a thoughtful man, but a person who cares about this country, and I'm proud to have his endorsement.
Steve King was stripped of his committee assignments in
Well said. Well said, Vivek.
2019. You mentioned the New
I think that
York
was wrong.
Times. He was quoted as saying, white nationalist, white supremacist, Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? Do you agree with those comments?
Well, I think that I take Steve King's words over the New York Times, that he didn't say those things. And I've had my own experiences with the media, and I understand that if Steve King, who I've gotten to know, and I really believe that this is an honest man, is a patriot who cares about speaking the truth, versus some New York Times reporter who hasn't offered a shred of evidence that he said such a thing. First of all, let's start with that. I don't even think those are the facts. I think there's something deeper, though. And I actually was looking at this because someone sent this to me last night after a lot of the backlash relating to the Steve King endorsement. They sent a whole New York Times compilation of all the racist things he said, supposedly racist things he said. Well, actually, some of them are just calling for basic border security in the United States, calling for English as the national language in the United States, pointing out the criminality of many people who have come to this country illegally. A lot of that isn't racist at all. And so when you take a look at the New York Times' compilation of all of the supposedly racist things he said, I'd encourage people to do that. Maybe I'll post it today. people can judge for themselves. Is that really racist, or is this a man who's actually speaking his convictions that are true and good-hearted, that the mainstream media, and the New York Times in this case in particular, has decided to label as a word that they know will alienate people? That's not the cancel culture we want in our country. Have the open debate. Maybe you disagree that English should be the national language of the United States, but let's have that debate in the open instead of castigating somebody and making them a pariah. People asked me even last night, will you denounce white supremacy? We live in a moment where, don't forget, a lot of the left has defined white supremacy to include things like punctuality or the written word. This is just as of a couple of years ago. Even many in the DEI Academy, in academia and otherwise, have said concepts like this are vestiges of white supremacy. These words have ceased to mean anything. And so if somebody wants to define white supremacy for me, then we can actually have a serious conversation about it. But until then, I think a lot of this is actually a charade. I think Steve King was defeated in part because of a donor establishment that used a toxic influence on money in politics to be able to disfavor him. But this is somebody who I believe is a patriot. I'm proud to have his endorsement. I'm not afraid to say it. And I think that that's what makes me different than a lot of the other candidates.
Let's talk about...
And as a matter of fact, they tried the same nonsense with President Trump. How many times have they called President Trump a racist? Remember? How many times have they called him a racist? How many times have they lied on President Trump concerning them trying to racially profile him and create a racist out of him? By the way, I'm saying this being a black man. Trump is no racist. Not at all. And a disagreement with a black man, if you are white, does not make you a racist. Okay? If anything, Trump is what you call a perfectionist. He's a professional who is highly professional as an individual. And I'm talking now about his work ethic. I'm not talking about his morals. Okay? I certainly do not subscribe to his morals. As a born-again Christian, I don't subscribe to his morals at all. But I'm able to separate issues. For example, Vivek is not born again. He's a Hindu. Okay? So I'm able to separate issues. There is no scripture in the Bible that suggests that I should hate a person like Vivek at all. If anything, I'm supposed to proclaim the gospel to him when I meet him, whenever that would be, if it ever happens. The point, though, is this. He's got it right when he says he will believe the individual over what the media would say, because journalists in the media would write statements for the purpose of creating the narrative without providing a shred of evidence. And the simpletons and all the gullible people in the public domain will run with that narrative and find that person guilty as charged in the public domain's opinion. And that's the whole intention of a narrative by the media. Okay, the mainstream media. That's a whole intention of the establishment as well. So he's got it once again, point on. Now I'm sure by now you can see what do I mean, or what I meant when I say he was firing on all cylinders right at the beginning.
White supremacy and what happened last night for a moment, because when you were talking to reporters last night, you called white supremacy.
Proud to have his endorsement. I'm not afraid to say it, and I think that that's what makes me different than a lot of the other candidates.
Let's talk about white supremacy and what happened last night for a moment, because when you were talking to reporters last night, you called white supremacy a myth. When someone asked you about Dylan Roof, you said you didn't know who that is. Have you looked up what happened in 2015?
Yeah, look, I said this last night. Invidious racial discrimination is wrong no matter how it happens. But if a Washington Post reporter is asking me almost like a catechism, whatever question I said, I'm against invidious racial discrimination, whatever form it takes, but says, do you denounce white supremacy? It's incumbent on us for us to define what white supremacy is. I wrote my book, Woke Inc., and I've written about the detailed understanding of what the popular understanding of these terms have come to mean. Do you believe punctuality is a vestige of white supremacy, Dasha?
Look.
I take my head off for Mr. Ramaswamy. He is brilliant. I'm telling you, the guy is brilliant. Did you hear what he just did? Right from the gate, or from the outset, right from the outset, he says invidious racism is wrong, right? Now, any thinking person already knows that that includes white supremacy. They know that. But the lady still goes further to ask the question, do you think that's a white supremacist white supremacy is wrong, he's already dismantled it, right? And he then says, as a debater that I suspect he was, I don't know enough about him to know whether he was a debater at varsity or at high school, but to me he sounds that he was. It sounds like he was. It takes one to see one. But observe what he says. Let's define our terms. What do you mean by white supremacy? Can you see that? Because we can use the same words and mean something completely different. Can you see that? Because the mainstream media likes to behave as though there is a systemic white supremacy or white racism in America right now. And if that is the case, who is in charge? It's Joe Biden. What would that then mean about Joe Biden? Do you get the point? Because we need to always separate between something that is systemic or something that is happening in different chunks, but yet we have made progress as a society. This is very, very important. Unless you are a race hustler, which I suspect this individual is. I'll rewind it once again so that we get the context.
What white supremacy is. I wrote my book, Woke Inc., and I've written about the detailed understanding of what the popular understanding of these terms have come to mean. Do you believe punctuality is a vestige of white supremacy, Dasha?
Look,
because if you don't, then you have a disagreement about many of the people who are defining those terms, or the written word, or the use, or the nuclear family. These aren't my words. These are the words of intellectual proponents from Ibram Kendi to the Ayanna Presleys to BLM that have said these are vestiges of white supremacy. So
Mr.
we can't have it both ways.
What you do, though,
we have to have an honest
you
discussion.
Straw man arguments.
This is not a straw man.
You brought up Jussie Smollett as the best
Jussie
example
Smollett
of white
was the
supremacy.
hottest thing in news in the back of a fake actual attack on him that we have to contend with.
And yet you have examples like the Buffalo shooter in New York just in 2022.
You have other
but
examples.
You are also cherry picking when you bring up Jussie Smollett.
I'll look at all of the statistics. More black on black crime. If you really care about actual crime against black Americans, let's get to the root causes of it in the inner cities of this country.
The Anti-Defamation League tracked a 38% increase in white supremacist propaganda last year.
Who's tracking that?
The Anti-Defamation League.
Yeah, the ADL, I don't think is a particularly credible source when they have cherry-picked information.
So who are we supposed to look to when we're talking about
I would suggest look at there's a table, 2x2 table. Federal law enforcement data, which you could say what you do. Maybe we shouldn't believe that either. But look at black on Asian crime, black on black crime, white on black crime.
Blow by blow. Wow. So Vivek, first and foremost, has not set up any straw man. A straw man is when you say someone is using a straw man in argument, you are literally calling them unethical. Because that's what a straw man argument is. It's an unethical argument that you place on the table. You literally take someone's argument and you put in your own argument, which is what this lady has been doing right throughout this interview, including calling his argument a straw man. That on its own is a straw man argument, meaning her conduct is what is a straw man in this case, because she is literally lying, because Vivek did not use any straw man. Vivek is debating almost every subject that is in the political landscape of America right now. And then because she doesn't like the subject of discussion at the time, she calls it a straw man, right? And yet Vivek is just simply giving an example of how the media, the mainstream media, has been operating. This is ridiculous. And then she points out that this is information that which we got from ADL. And Vivek points out that, but wait a minute, ADL is woke. There's absolutely nothing credible that we can receive from them. Can you see that? And it's like now she's throwing up her hands in the air. If we're not supposed to trust ADL, then who are we supposed to trust? That's why I was laughing and saying blow by blow. Let's continue.
Statistics. That's a law enforcement agency. 59.1% was based on race, ethnicity, and ancestry, saying hate crimes rose 12% between 2020 and 2021.
Look at the absolute crimes themselves. What they classify as a hate crime is itself a political judgment. I think that when you actually care about protecting life, if you want to say Black Lives Matter, let's look at where Black lives are actually being lost. It's in the cities, at the heart of other Black Americans and criminals that are restrained by the absence
that we talk about as well. But are we supposed to ignore white supremacist hate crimes?
We're not supposed to ignore any kind of crime, Dasha. That's what I say. But what I see is a selective reporting. Take the Nashville Transgender Shooter Manifesto. Every shooter manifesto in a mass shooting has been released within 48 hours, except for that one shooter in Nashville. Now, it ended up being leaked. What do you see? It wasn't a white supremacist. It was somebody that was actually making fun of using derogatory terms. I believe.
Okay, so why are you okay talking about that manifesto and not?
There she goes again. There she goes again. Why are you okay to talk about that manifesto, which we as the media didn't talk about? Basically, that's what she's saying. You get the point? But yet, once again, Vivek is giving her an example of their modus operandi. Okay? And so you have a scenario in the studio where you have a political masquerade acting as a journalist, and it's probably the ample time that I'm saying this because I can't emphasize this adequately. So every time she receives answers which she doesn't like or her political handlers would not like, according to what she obviously has been communicated to her, she has to interject, she has to insult the interviewee, she has to say we don't have time, we're going to the next question, she has to call the interviewee unethical by lying and saying that the interviewee is arguing a straw man, and now she's saying, but why are you comfortable talking about that as though it's a no-go area? No, it's not a no-go area. The fact that the manifest of other perpetrators have been received within 48 hours and this one was hidden from the public is a big issue that the media should have made a big hoo-ha about, but no such a thing was made. Why? Because there was a narrative, a political narrative being perpetrated to create an impression that that was a white supremacist that perpetrated those crimes. And it turns out when the manifest comes out that that was not the case. Why are you as a media journalist happy to leave such a sour taste in the mouth of the voters, of the citizens of America and the world over? Why is that the case? Why must you guys lie in the public domain and get away with it without losing your jobs? This for me is really pathetic. Really it is.
That one shooter in Nashville. Now, it ended up being leaked. What do you see? It wasn't a white supremacist. It was somebody that was actually making fun of using derogatory terms. I believe.
Okay, so why are you okay talking about that manifesto and not talking about the manifesto from the 2015?
I'm more than okay talking about both, but what I'm asking is why is the mainstream media suppress that one? Why did the police suppress that one? Why was that the one shooter manifesto that of all of the mass shootings, every other shooter manifesto has been released? I'm focused on that one because that's the one that's been hidden from us. And it comes back to the point of my candidacy and the way I'm going to run this country. Trust the people with the truth. If it doesn't match your narrative,
the reality is right now,
I think the media did not hold the police accountable. They would have been demanding that.
Starting to gain traction with the black community, with Latino voters. Do not worry that your rhetoric is pushing them away. There are folks
to the contrary. I think we're going to bring black people into this movement.
There she goes again. There she goes again. By the way, that's a real strawman argument, what she's doing. Because observe what they were talking about. And now she's coming up with something that's got nothing to do with what they were discussing to create an impression that Vivek is going to lose the Latino vote and the black voters simply because of his stance on these issues. That is amazing, right? Nevertheless, Vivek is well capable of defending himself. Arguably the best candidate in doing that in this campaign.
About your rhetoric.
Well, you know what? I'm concerned about their corruption. If you had somebody who actually one of the most prominent black influencer the other day, what did she say? I've been black my whole life, and this man could actually unify this country in response to a long exchange I had with a black pastor who had an event here in Iowa, did challenge me with a hard question, asking me, are my views against affirmative action, how do those align with historical racial injustice?
Affirmative action is a debate that is being had.
If I may just finish this. If I may finish my point,
deal with
Dasha.
racism,
I think I will be better
positioned. Denying that racism is a problem.
I've never denied that racism is a problem. And if you listen to the response I gave to that black pastor, my whole point is racism has been a major problem for most of our national history. But we're getting close to the promised land that Martin Luther King envisioned. We're as darn close to it as we ever have been. And so what bothers the heck out of me is it's right when we're close to that promised land. Martin Luther King said it, I may not get there with you, and he didn't get there with us. But I think it desecrates the legacy of our civil rights movement, desecrates the legacy of Martin Luther King, that right when we get closest to the point of having racial equality and gender equality and even opportunities for people of minorities of many types, are we perfect? No. But are we as close as we've ever been? Yes, we have. To then obsess over systemic racism, to then obsess over white guilt and otherwise, we're creating new waves of racism, Dasha, that we otherwise would have avoided right when we're closest to having achieved what even the proponents of the civil rights movement would have dreamed of. That's what bothers me. My exchange with that black pastor about a week or so ago, right here in Iowa, not far from where we are, it was in Indianola, not far from where we are in Des Moines, was that we're founded on the pursuit of a more perfect union, the pursuit of liberty, equality, and justice for all. And I reject this left-wing narrative that's creating more artificial division. So I believe I will bring more black and Hispanic voters into our movement, not by saying fake poll-tested slogans, but by speaking the hard truth, that we've been imperfect in our past, but let us celebrate the progress we've made and reject the media's cherry-picking narratives to actually get to the truth of the matter. And now if we care about black lives, the things we're going to do isn't obsessing about white supremacy.
Mr.
It's actually
Ramaswamy.
fixing the problems in our cities, which I will do as our president.
I want to move it.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. My goodness. What do you have to say to this? Vivek for president. That's all I can say. Vivek for president. Hey, what a pity that I'm not going to be able to vote in these elections because I'm a South African. My goodness. This guy. Did you guys hear that? Did you hear that? This is somebody who has absolutely no problem to dismantle this lady's arguments with facts. That's all he's been doing here. He's not been antagonizing them. He's simply destroying their narrative, giving facts after facts. Did you observe when the lady accused him of an unethical conduct, how composed, when she claimed that he's a strawman, how composed he remained? Because remember, he knows what a strawman argument is. So this individual in front of you is now accusing you of an unethical conduct. But did you see how composed he remained and simply pointed out that that's not a strawman? And he continued to explain. This young man, for me, is remarkable. I'm telling you, he's remarkable. I'll be very, very surprised if he doesn't get the nominee of the GOP. Save, of course, Donald Trump is still running. If Trump is still running, he's not going to get the nominee. That goes without saying, because many Republicans have a proclivity to, firstly, they believe that Trump has been done wrongly, and I agree with them in 2020, and I agree with them on that aspect. However, I think it's time to move on. I don't think that America wouldn't be a country if they have a different president. Right now, they have a different president, and they are still a country that is being destroyed. And in Vivek Ramaswamy, they stand a very good chance of an upward trajectory rather than a civil war, which it looks to me that's what the Democrats are literally pushing for if Trump were to be a president. There's absolutely, as far as I can see, no, I can't say no Democrat, but majority of Democrats do not want Trump. They hate him vehemently. And there are even rhinos, Republicans in name only, who hate Donald Trump. Okay? Others like the Nikki Haley's are pretending just in case Trump becomes a president and I can get to be a deputy and so on and so forth. There is a recent debate where she raised her hand up, even though she's pretending. She has to pretend because of a donor class that is anti-Trump. But the point is that I take my head off for this youngster. Vivek Ramaswamy, I'm telling you, he clearly has been cooked properly. He understands the dynamics in the American political landscape. And for me, if you listen to the questions that he's had to answer here, I would give him 100, a 10 out of 10. Let's put it that way. I was going to say 100%, but let's say a 10 out of 10. This interview doesn't seem to want to end. We still have about 10 minutes to go. A good 11 minutes, 10 plus, not 11 minutes, solid 10 plus to go. Let's go.
We're nearly out of time. Let's do a couple of really quick questions as a lightning round to clear this out. You've proposed major changes to the national election system. Do you have faith in Iowa's caucus process, and will you accept the results?
Look, I would love to accept the results if this is fairly conducted, as I expect and hope that it will be. But I do think at the national electoral system, we need single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday with paper ballots, government-issued ID to match the voter file, and English as the sole language on a ballot. I stand by that.
That's not how the national election is going to be conducted in November, though. Would you accept a Biden victory in November if that's how things go? And is it time
I don't think that's how things are going to go.
But if that's how it goes, would you accept it?
If that's how it goes through a free and fair election system, then obviously I will accept the results of an electoral process. But what I will tell you this is, we need an electoral process we can trust and believe in. And so that if we're going to see that,
but your requirements aren't going to happen by November.
Dasha, I think that in some ways this question is based on a fictitious premise that people who are allowed to run for president even are able to run for president. Right now, we're having a discussion about one of the two major candidates being removed forcibly from the ballot. So we have major forms of election interference staring us in the face.
So are you saying that the way things are right now, if Biden wins, you wouldn't accept it?
I want to deal with the issues that we have right in front of us, which is we have major interventions.
So you can't give a direct answer on that right now?
Whoever wins the election...
Is this Dasha girl blonde? Or is that a dye on her hair? I'm just being naughty.
A fair and free process, I will accept that result. And I'm committed to making sure that we have a fair and free process in the year ahead. And I expect that we will because of efforts of people like me to make sure of it. The election interference in this GOP primary. I mean, literally right now.
You're saying election interference right now.
Yes,
so
Maine's Secretary of State has actively removed one candidate from a ballot without going through any type of judicial process. Yes, that is election interference. And I'm keen on making sure that's set correct. I have full expectations that the Supreme Court will set this correctly. And so with full confidence in our system, which includes three branches of government, including the judicial branch.
So are you confident you'll be able to accept the results if Biden does win the election in November?
I'm confident the judicial branch is going to do the right thing such that we have a process that we can all actually get behind. That's what I'm confident of, and I believe the judicial branch, up to and including the Supreme Court, will do the right thing. And I have confidence in our Supreme Court, the last bastion of an institution that I think we can trust in this country, and I believe and hope and fully expect they're going to get this right. That's what I stand by.
Let me ask you this. What do you think is the lesson from January 6th that you take away from it, and what do you think the country should take away from it?
I think there are a lot of lessons. First of all, to draw lessons, we need the facts. The government still has not fully released all of the video footage. We've seen it released piecemeal. So the first lesson is this. Just tell us the truth. Whatever it is, if it's ugly, just tell us the truth. Why suppress some video footage and release others? Why not actually be open about how many federal agents or informants were in the field? Why hold people in prison but without actually charging them with a specific crime? Just be open with the public. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two is if you tell people they cannot speak, that's when they scream. If you tell people they cannot scream, that's when they tear things down. Systematic censorship in that year leading up to January 6th. Suppressing some of the most important information about a global pandemic to the most important information about a political candidate on the eve of an election created deep concerns in this country. We should never make those mistakes again. Censorship is wrong no matter who commits it, left or right. So transparency and free speech, they're vital to our country. Those are 1776 lessons that we would do well to remember today as well. And
Can't agree more. Can't agree more.
let it also be a reminder that we're skating on thin ice as a country. It's now more important than ever to unite this country around the shared principles that set the United States into motion. That's what I'm in this race to do, and that's, I think, a healthy reminder that we can take from what happened that day.
I want to ask you about you spoke about a personal experience here in Iowa. You spoke about your wife Apoorva's miscarriage. Does that experience shape how you view abortion policy and whether the law should allow for some abortions when pregnancies aren't viable, like in the case of Kate Cox?
So I think that personal experience did shape, I think, my views, and I would say even mine and Apoorva's views, our family's views on abortion. I've been pro-life for a long time. Logic leads me to many of my positions. If brainwaves end, and that's when life ends, I think you can't say that life begins any later than when brainwaves begin. That's 5 or 6 weeks after conception. But here's my view on the abortion issue. I think that the pro-life movement, and I consider myself part of that, hasn't done enough to walk the walk in actually standing for life and pro-life principles. I want to talk about more expansive policies of ease of access to adoption, to child care. And I, for one, I think I'm alone in the GOP on this, but I hope more embrace it. As a man, I will say this. We need to codify sexual responsibility into the law to say that if a woman brings a child to term, she should, at her option, be able to make the man the principal caretaker financially responsible for raising that child if it's confirmed by a genetic paternity test. I think that's how we're able to unite the country at least as best we can on this issue, to say it's not about men's rights or women's rights. It's about human rights. In the case of a pregnant woman who was assaulted when the unborn child died, I haven't met one person, left or right, who says that that criminal doesn't deserve liability for that death.
So
that says we share these pro-life instincts in common, and I want us to do better as Republicans to actually stand for those life principles than we have done to date.
So in the case of Kate.
And I agree with Vivek 100%. 100%. I mean, think about it long and hard. When it comes to, people may be divided. So others will be pro-human women rights. Others will say they are pro-life. But indeed, this is not an issue about women's rights. This is an issue about the child. At what point in time does a child conceived in a woman's womb become a human being? Some of us who Christians believe that at conception that child is a human being, right? Why? We've got plenty of scriptures to support that. Now, of course, someone else is going to argue and say America is not run according to the principles of the Bible. Well, isn't that really a problem? Isn't that a major factor as to why America finds itself where it is right now? A first world country that can't even run a free and fair elections properly. That it has become so corrupted. Remember, when you move God out of schools, you move God out of public institutions, what are you doing? There is no vacuum in leadership or in administration. You have brought in Lucifer, right? Which means you are bringing the father of lies and the father of lawlessness in play. This is why, for example, right now you have a judiciary, a justice system that is not working the way it ought to. Listen to some of the foolish decisions that these judges, who pro-democratic judges, have made in these many Trump cases. Look at how the FBI is being utilized literally to target Republicans. Now, you can deny that all you want, but the treatment of individuals across political lines is not the same. The things that Nancy Pelosi is getting away with right now in terms of her role in January 6th, right? Trump wouldn't get away with that, okay? No Republican would get away with that, right? And so what I'm trying to say is there is an effect when you remove God from society. Society literally, their morality gets to be decayed. There is a reason why many highly educated Americans believe that a biological man like myself can fall pregnant. It's amazing, the folly. You have to have a PhD to believe some of the things that these lawyers and these individuals that were interviewed in the Senate and Congress have said publicly, right? But these are only made in America. You can just simply put the trademark of America on them. These theories have only been made in America. Remember the story of Leah Thomas, only made in America. Taking 15-year-olds and forcing them, even children who are 8 years old, and forcing them to be to change their agenda against their parents' knowledge, or you force the parents to support the children, or else they are going to go to prison. To take these transforming medications and give them to children for the purposes, and yet these things sterilize the children, right? That can only happen to a group of people who have been handed over to a reprobate mind, okay? This is not thinking. A clearly thinking group of people. A woman cannot give birth to a baby girl and then later the same woman is arguing that that baby girl has a right to become a boy. No, there is no straight thinking person that can get into that domain. So, and also a woman cannot carry a child and then want at 6 weeks to be aborting that child, right? Whatever the reason or that you want to give, that is still murder. Now, of course, those are my personal views, right? It goes without saying. Nevertheless, for me, it's fascinating that America doesn't see itself as being its own worst enemy, that they have allowed Satan to ascend to the highest office in their country. I'm not saying Joe Biden is Satan, no, but I'm simply saying the policies of removing God. Remember, America was founded on Judean Christian principles, and most Western democracies were founded on Judean Christian principles. And Judean Christian principles are pretty clear. Okay, God is a supreme being, not man. We don't worship man, we worship God. We don't idolize man, we idolize God. If we have to have an idol, then that will have to be God, right? If you can think about God being an idol. But God is the one whom we love with all our hearts, all our souls, all our being, with all that which we have, right? It becomes problematic when you get into a nation of people who, it's a first world country. It's not a third world country like my country. And these people are educated. And they think that it is civil to be arguing about killing babies, right? How many millions of babies are murdered in this country? And they claim that they are not worshipping Moloch. This is ridiculous, right? But nevertheless, I digress. But obviously, you can tell that I'm very passionate about this subject. And so for this to be asked from Vivek as to, because remember, this is a Democrat's talking point. And this is how you also know that NBC is so left, right? There's nothing right about them.
Where that pregnancy was not viable and she had to go through the courts. Is it a compassionate message for the GOP to say that she shouldn't? Would you have allowed her to have that abortion?
Well, I think, Bran, with due respect, I think that you are overlaying a lot of assumptions to say that's not a viable pregnancy. I don't think that that's a correct characterization. The facts are still coming out, and I'm not firsthand in the room with her and her doctor. But I don't think that it is an accepted fact at all that that was not a child who was going to be born. That child absolutely could have been alive if that pregnancy was taken to term. And so I think that a lot of the overlay in the narrative around this has confounded the reality.
Testified
but
that
what
it
I
was
stand
not a
by,
viable
not a viable pregnancy is viable until what age? After birth. I think these are separate debates and nuances that we deserve to have, rather than just telling the public that that baby would have never made it to term, which, on my understanding of the facts, is actually false. And so we need to get to actual detail rather than just using vague terms like viable when that refers to viable even after birth. What I think we need is
And it's very difficult to accept that from people who believe in killing babies in any case. Why would you accept that from the leftist? That no, it was not a viable pregnancy. I mean, absolute nonsense.
Sensible policies in this country that implement pro-life views. And the pro-life views that I support are no federal funding for Planned Parenthood. Our taxpayers dollars shouldn't be going to fund Planned Parenthood. I think we need to stand for life in the form of access to adoption, access to child care. I think we can have a legitimate bipartisan discussion about that. And I favor a policy that says this should not be borne exclusively by women. It's wrong. I think men should share in this responsibility equally, or at least as equally as we can. I think the woman, if it's confirmed by a genetic paternity test, should legally be able to make the man the sole responsible party for raising that child, which will force men to take responsibility for their sexual decisions on the front end, not just putting this on women. And I think that's the way we need to not only frame, but actually approach this issue, to say this issue doesn't have to divide us to a breaking point. We're in this together, that we understand that unborn life is life, we respect it. I believe most people actually share those instincts in common if we don't make this a men versus women's issue. And I, for my part, not just as a Republican, but as a man, am willing to go to the fullest extent possible to stand for those pro-life principles. More access to crisis pregnancy care and otherwise that doesn't exist in the country. Let's have that conversation, and I think that's far more productive than trying to have some sort of split the difference compromise about which week is or isn't the one where you actually draw the line.
And let's just get to one final question.
Unbelievable. Now we're already at the one final question. Well, I guess we'll get to that, but Mr. Ramaswamy is spot on in his explanation of the different practicable alternatives that can be taken rather than be eager and zealous to kill babies in the womb. And as I have already said, and then claim or believe a lie that you are not serving Moloch. This is a very highly demonized society, the way I see it. And remember, I'm not an American, I've already said it. The only thing I said I regretted was not to vote. I don't regret that I'm not an American. I believe American society is highly demonized. The fact that people can believe it to be a right of a woman to abort a body that is not hers. When a woman is aborting a child, that is not their body. That's a body of another human being. Nevertheless, let's listen to the last question.
with an issue that's on the minds of so many with the war in between Israel and Hamas. You've said in one of your town halls in Hampton, Iowa, that Palestinian people live the best life they do anywhere on earth in Israel. You've also called a two-state solution a myth. Do you believe in a one-state solution?
I believe in the role of the U.S. president, which is that I'm running for the president of the United States, not the president of Israel or another country. So I've been very clear in my position on this, Dasha. I think Israel gets to nationally self-determine its future. Israel has the right to exist and to defend its own existence. Those are decisions for Israel to make. Israel's an ally of the United States, and our role as an ally is to give them the diplomatic support that they need to make those decisions. I think that's the most pro-Israel view of anybody in the Republican field, even though it's traditionally different than the standard political orthodoxy. I think what Israel needs is not the UN or the US or the EU second-guessing their decisions. And so that's how I think we most strongly support Israel. I think it's the right thing to do as the United States. Support Israel diplomatically to be able to defend itself to the fullest. Because what Hamas did, it was subhuman. It was medieval. It was immoral. It was wrong. And Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself and to exist. And Israel has the right to determine its own future, whether a one-state solution or otherwise is the right path forward. That's a decision for Israel to make. In the United States, I'm focused on our own border risks. So I would tell Bibi, you can smoke the terrorists on your southern border, and we support you doing it. We're going to smoke the terrorists on our own southern border because we have our problems to deal with here at home. And that's how each of our allies will stand for the other diplomatically, and that's how I would lead.
All right, Mr. Ramaswamy.
Ladies and gentlemen, President-in-waiting of the US of A and the free world, Vivek Ramaswamy, tell me what you think about this interview. It was phenomenal. The young man is something else. If you are not yet persuaded, tell me why you are not persuaded. Please tell me why you are not persuaded. I would vote for this young man any day over and ahead, DJT. Make no mistake, I like DJT for all which we as citizens of the world benefited during his time as a president. With all his faults, he was the best president, in my view, that I have seen since Reagan. And this includes Reagan in my view and in my books. He was the best president for America. You guys tell me what you think down below. Have yourselves a lovely one. I want to repeat, this is my parting shot. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the President-in-waiting of the US of A, Vivek Ramaswamy. Of course, don't hold me to it if he does not win the elections. It's just a wish, okay? It's a desire. The guy is brilliant. Okay, see you in the next video then. Ciao, ciao. Bye now.